And I see we're already following most of them. So the first house rule is that all mics are off. Second house rule is that all cameras are off. And if you have a question during a speaker's session, please just put it in the chat box. If it's really pressing, you can raise your hands, but there is a session for Q&A after each speaker's session. So I will jot down the rules in a little bit, but today's workshop is quite near to my heart because we continuously say that there is not enough representation of Black chartered accountants within the industry. But at the same token, or by the same token, we don't have enough programs to facilitate and ensure that Black candidates actually make it through to qualification. So what we have noted as APASA and a couple of other stakeholders within the CASA qualification route is that APC has now become that hurdle that, sorry, I'm not crying, the hurdle that keeps people away from qualifying. So today's workshop is an introduction of the various programs in place, and as well we have a couple of guest speakers who will be speaking on specific topics, the program of which I will put in the chat box. So without wasting any further time, and to spare you guys from my voice, I do have our first speaker, who is Caroline, who is the assistant umpire, or was, sorry, the assistant umpire for March 2021 APC sitting, and her topic will be what SAICA's expectations are. So I'll hand over to you, Caroline. Thank you.
Thanks, Siba. I hope you take care of the voice there. Good morning, everyone. I'm actually being load shedded, so let's hope I'm gonna get through this without any hiccups. But if they are, I'll try to get back into the call. I think as Siba has introduced me, my name is Caroline Bontle-Khokhome. I think I've been with SAICA for quite a number of years, looking at the APC and the ITC. I guess I'm also passionate about getting involved in facilitating our CA into the world, and I'm quite glad to be doing this for you. So my topic would be I'll touch on SAICA expectation. I'll touch on the gaps that we are evidence throughout this professional exam, and I'll also touch on how can we bridge the gap between the gaps that we're seeing throughout this exam. So I guess the first expectation from SAICA would be that you're competent, and what competency means is you can be viewed, or you can have an ability to execute a task. Literally, that's what competency means. If you're able to execute a task in the real world, then it means you are competent, and that's exactly what SAICA wants from a qualifying chartered accountant. So that's the competency. And we can have a three-way of looking at what competency means, which is you need to acquire knowledge, meaning there has to be a foundation to develop your competency. And that foundation is by acquiring knowledge. The second one is while you're acquiring knowledge, you need to more or less develop understanding. So foundation is not only requiring knowledge, but also the understanding of that knowledge. Like you're able to more or less understand what you acquire in there. The third one would be, do you have an experience to execute tasks? So the ability to apply that knowledge and understanding in a practical circumstances that will result in you being competent. So those are the three ways that SAICA will look at if somebody is competent or not. So those are. And I guess to be able to acquire, develop understanding and have experience in executing that, you would also need pervasive skills and qualities to be able to do that, right? Um, and one those things that we would look at is your ethics and your professionalism. What do I mean? Like, I mean, this is like, I'm not giving practical example. I'll do when I do gaps and you'll see how all this actually comes together. But ethics and professionalism is like, are you able to act with honesty and integrity? When you perform your work, are you able to do that with due care? Are you able to protect public interest and so on and so on? So those are your ethical and professionalism that SAICA would be looking at when they're assessing that competency. Another one of those qualities and skills will be your personal attributes. Like, are you able to manage yourself? Are you able to work effectively within a team? And are you able to manage your time effectively? So those are also one of the skills that, without even realizing them, if you don't have them, I think um, to be able to reach that competency level, you would struggle a bit. The third one I want to speak about is the professional skills that we're looking for, and one of them is from the first thing that we look at when we look at professional skills is, how do you obtain information as an individual? Are you able to gather, develop accurate, relevant information and ideas? When you do that, are you able to develop an understanding of an entity environment when you gathering that or obtaining that information? Um, are you the next one will be something like, when after you've obtained that information, how do you examine and interpret information and ideas critically? So that will lead to like critical thinking. Like, are you able to analyze that information or ideas? Are you able to perform or compute any calculation independently? How do you verify and validate information that you have? Are you able to integrate ideas and information from various sources? How do you draw conclusions and opinions from what you've gathered? The third thing from professional skills that we look at is problem solving and decision making. How do you identify and look at problems and issues? Are you able to develop solution? When you make decisions, are you able to recommend the next solution or provide advice on what we're seeing? So for us, if we look at problem solving, that would be what we're looking at. And lastly, we would look at your communication. Are you able to communicate effectively and efficiently? What do I mean by that? Like, when you share your information, do we see like facts, opinion, how you're writing it? Is it, when you prepare a document, are you able to effectively use or document in such a way when somebody reads it, they're able to understand where you're coming from, how your thinking process is, and what decisions and that you're making throughout your communication. So remember, those are the things that Psycha is actually more or less expecting from a candidate who wants to qualify as a chartered accountant. And I hope if you have any questions on this, just drop it on the chat and we can talk about it on our Q&A. So I mean, I spoke about your ethical, your professionalism, your personal attributes, and your professional skills. And from an exam perspective, what have we evidence with candidates coming in and writing this exam? I mean, this exam is you've got a pre-release and you've got 5 days to research and you come sit in in for the exam. And I think the first thing that I would I think is a gap and what we've been seeing throughout the years is um if I want to say not enough research has been done on a particular industry, but I'm going to put it in a way that if enough research is done on a particular industry, then a lack of application is shown on that industry or the research that has been done from a pre-release perspective. So from my side, what I'm saying, the first thing that we're seeing is you spend 5 days researching on your pre-release or whatever the case study is or the industry is. But when you sit down on that day um, to sort of put everything in paper, we're not seeing that research that you've been doing for the last 5 days. It's not incorporated in the tasks or the question that are being asked. Using a pre-research answer, like not also not this is the second one. Like what we're seeing is people just they go research, they think this will be the question that are being asked, so they've got a pre-research answer. You come into the day and you're not able to apply that information that is given in the day to the answer that you have or the pre-research answer that you have. It's so important, I think, to do that, because if you not doing that, then it's you showing sort of a lack of integration of information that you're seeing. Also, the third thing that we're seeing is lack of application, theory dumping. I mean, I guess there's a reason why you're being asked to bring in your research, to bring in everything with you. I don't think anyone will ask you to then write them down for you. I think what we want to see is the application there of that theory. But what we're seeing is the theory dump. That's the third thing. The fourth thing that we're seeing is lack of technical skills and critical thinking when analyzing the information. For me, there is not asking the why is this wrong, what the issue, what exactly the issue is. Then you define your issue. Then once you define your issue, you go and recommend the correct action, then you conclude. So, I mean, just looking at those three for me, the first one, you identify the issue and you recommend. You more or less showing your technical competency there, showing that I know what's wrong and I know how to resolve it. But from a critical thinking is you bring everything together, more or less of saying, okay, this is wrong, it should be this way, and this is how I recommend the correct action. So the gap there for me is just the lack of bring your technical skills and your critical thinking. The fifth one that we're seeing there is not responding on what is being asked, using previous APC responses or tasks to base your answers in, meaning you not exactly answering what's been asked, but you think this is how you should be. So it's very important to like step back and actually ask yourself, like, what is this task requiring for me? What am I being asked? And you able to maneuver that. The sixth one that I have, and which is my last one, is not being detailed enough on what is being asked, or identifying issue, analyzing it, finding a solution, and concluding. If you're not detailed enough, markers or anybody who looks at your responses would not have any idea how to help you or even assist you facilitating what you're trying to articulate from your answer. So details matter. Being able to articulate what the issue is, analyzing it, finding a solution, and concluding is quite important in being competent in a task. So, I mean, I've there's a lot of gaps I would talk about throughout the exam, but I think the six are important enough for you to have the foundation to be able to know what not to do. I mean, to repeat them again, the first one is, when you've done your research, please show it. Please show what you've done through answering your task. The second one is having a pre-prepared answer and not incorporating the information on the day that you get in to be able to come up with the correct or a sound response on a task. The third one would be just dumping theory without application. Application is important. The fourth one is showing lack of technical skills and critical thinking. I mean, okay, let me give an example there. If you get a question around, which has been done before, around leases, and you go into just, I mean, if they ask you, like, the entity has this rentals, and you have to make decisions if they need to be accounting for right of use assets, or lease liability. Which ones do you have? Short-term ones, long-term ones? Those thinking is around your technical, the standards, how to apply it, but take it further, read into the information. What is being asked here? What information do I have to make a decision here? So for me, that's where we're going on. The fifth one is not really responding on what's been asked, relying on, like I've done a lot of APC tasks. This is how previously things have been done. You really need to apply to a scenario of the day or the pre-release. What's been asked, like stick to what you're seeing on that day. Apply what you've been asked on that day. And lastly, not having enough detail or on what's been asked, or identifying issue, analyzing it, finding solution, and concluding. So those are my six. And I think while I was going through the gaps, I more or less was telling you how to more or less bridge that gap. But I mean, let's go through it again. Evidence your research by integrating it to what is being asked. That's the first thing. I mean, I think if you've done this is your foundation. You get you get a tick. Take a step back to look at the pre-release and how that is being incorporated to your information of the day. What additional information is needed or triggered for you to be able to answer that task appropriately. So like, don't just go with this is what we research, because you don't know what you're going to be asked that day. They could have additional information. The scenario you've given to pre-research could have changed slightly. So you really need to step back and say, okay, for my pre-release, the trigger were 1, 2, 3. From what is been triggered, there's additional information that's been entered, and this is 1, 2, 3. Then you'll be more or less know how to maneuver throughout your responses. The third thing for me in bridging the gap is understanding your triggers and ask yourself, what could go wrong? Like, every time you take a research, you look at something, it's always good to ask you, in a real world, what could go wrong? And by doing that, you keep your mind analyzing this information, and you're able to prepare yourself, looking at different scenarios, and be able to maneuver through it when you're looking at that day. And the fourth one for me is your technical skills and your critical thinking requires you to use what you have and what you have learned. So it's really important to respond to what is being asked, right? I mean, I made a an example about Elise, but I mean, something I could give you is, you given a sort of an NPV, and they're using a discount rate. And if that discount rate is wrong, I think the first question you should ask yourself is, what would be the right discount rate? Then tick, that's your first thinking, the process. And why would that be the right discount rate? Articulate why you think the discount rate is wrong and what is right and why this is right. By just saying this is wrong, full stop, is not showing that you understand. You have to pick up the issue, you have to know what the solution is, and you have to conclude. So those three things, you have to always, when you do a task, keep them in mind. I need to I need to know what the issue is, I need to respond on the correct action, and I need to conclude. So I think once you've done that, you more or less show your thinking process, and you more showing your level of competency in dealing with issues or coming up with issues. Lastly, remember, in any scenario, there would be an issue or not, but definitely there would be an issue. What you need to do there is to find what the issue is. Again, analyze it, find a solution, conclude, and recommend. So for me, I think I will leave you with those 5 sort of points for you to go through when you're looking at any scenario. Because remember, you're already technically competent because you've done your ITC. Now what you need to evidence is, can you in real life be able to perform a task? So I mean, I always say to people, they say, no, this is a professional exam. Technical does matter, because that's where you start. You start with your technical competency, and everybody on this call is technically competent. So what you need to be
Sorry,
doing
Caroline.
is going through your critical thinking. Thank you.
Thank
Sorry.
you so much, Caroline. No, sorry, I just wanted to alert you to the time so that we can get into Q&A. But just to make sure, do you have any other points to make before we get into Q&A?
No. That will be it. That will be
Okay.
it.
So I don't see any questions coming out, but we had, oh, there, I see a hand. I'll take Sydney's question.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Caroline, again for the presentation there. Mine is a small one. I just have one question. I'd like to ask, what does SICA deem as a competent outcome? And this I ask from a point of view of some people are saying what they typically do is they go through the entire script, and then the marker will then give it to the other marker, and then go to the through the entire script as well, and then they either give you a C, B, C, or LC. And then obviously then if you're not making the C mark, if you maybe a BC or LC, and then they start delving deeper into your paper to see which tasks did you get an LC in, and stuff like that. So my question is, what is the approach for SICA, and what is a competent outcome? Thank you.
Thanks, Sydney. Sydney, I think the competent outcome is just that I'm able to execute the task. Are you able to define what the issue is? Sorry?
Oh, please switch off your mics, guys. Thanks.
It's just that are you able to identify what the issues are, recommend, and conclude on that? That's what competency is. And I actually don't think you should worry about what SICA does on how they mark in the process, they doing what they're not doing. I think what you need to worry about is how to be competent. And how to be competent is, in that day, are you able to look at a task, identify that issue, recommend the appropriate action, and conclude? So for me, like I could take you through what we do, but that's exactly what we're looking for somebody to be competent. Thanks.
Caroline, what I would also encourage the participants to do is just to process all that Caroline has said and just build questions that we can send to Caroline afterwards. Because even I found myself with questions, but I don't think we'll have enough time to go through all of it. So is it okay, Caroline, that we send you the questions afterwards?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Thank you, guys. So you can